Hello everybody and welcome to another 8-Bit Wars. Now this is my second 8-Bit Wars video, the first one being the Monty on the Run, which I did a couple of weeks ago. I've had some really positive feedback from that, so thank you guys for all that feedback, it's really useful. So anyway, without further ado, let's move on to the game that I'm doing today, and it's actually based on one that Andy has already done before, and that is the arcade conversion of Commando. Now this game, released by Alligator Software, authored by Steve Evans in 1985, is called Who Dares Wins 2. And so closely similar was it to Commando that Electronic Arts, Commando's publishers, actually tried to get the game taken off the shelf. And ultimately they reached an agreement which allowed both games to carry on being sold, which actually is really good because, as you're going to see, I actually think Who Dares Wins 2 is a really good interpretation of Commando and in some ways plays a little bit better than Commando does on some of the machines. So without further ado, let's take a look at Who Dares Wins 2, firstly on the ZX Spectrum. So here comes the ZX Spectrum version. I'm just loading it up, so bear with me a couple of moments. And here we are on the title screen. You can hear the primitive rendition of the Great Escape theme tune running there in the background on the Spectrum's beeper. Also notice on the title screen there's lots of different joystick and keyboard options, something which the other versions don't have. So let's start the game, and you notice immediately that the graphics are pretty primitive, and as are the sound effects. Again, using the Spectrum beeper, this is 48K version. Little bit of attribute clash going on there. You see as my guy's wandering around, he's generally supposed to be blue. Sometimes he changes black or green or whatever colour the graphics are immediately around him. And notice right now he's actually colouring little grains of sand. This is obviously a problem specific to the Spectrum version, but it's not really doing that much to try and resolve the issue. There are various techniques to make it look better, which appeared much more so in later games. The other thing that really strikes me about this version is that the men, there's lots of them on the screen, but they flicker a lot, and the more graphics you get on the screen in the Spectrum version, in fact this does affect all the versions, the more flickery the graphics get, but the Spectrum version is particularly bad for this. Now notice little red man I shot there, he's a little bonus guy, and he sort of wiggles down the screen, and the idea is that if you can shoot him you get a few extra points. And there's lots of little touches like that in this game which makes it a bit more fun. The other one is just here, is a la Commando, you can actually rescue one of your guys that has been captured and been held at gunpoint. Unfortunately in this instance I just killed him by mistake, and I don't think I actually get any points for that. In Who Dares Wins, again a bit like Commando, there's lots of different vehicles. So you can see there's a sort of flickery Land Rover or Jeep going across the bottom of the screen there, and an even more flickery boat going across the top. Again, graphics are very flickery, it's a real shame, and it seems to particularly affect the larger sprites. Again, we've got another plane coming across. Notice how the bombs that came out almost totally disappeared. Again, this makes the game quite difficult to play at times. You can't really see where the bombs are going. Having said that, the game isn't particularly difficult. There's a lot of men on screen here, but I'm not really having much trouble shooting them. And actually on the Spectrum, I think it's probably the easiest of all three versions, although all three versions are pretty easy. Now, I'm through already onto Outpost 2, and there's only 8 outposts in the game, so in a short space of time, I'm losing a couple of lives because I'm not really concentrating on this too much. I've got quite a long way through. Now, the screen we're on at the moment is quite interesting because on the Spectrum, this screen is completely different to the other two versions of the game. And I'm not too sure exactly why that is, but I'll mention it again when we come to the other two versions which look exactly the same, the Commodore 64 and the Amstrad. But for some reason the Spectrum version's got a different layout. It may be because actually some of the graphics are slightly larger. The tank graphic, for example, that we're looking at right now, that's probably about a third larger on Spectrum than it is on the other two formats. Now you can see there's lots of nice things going on the screen here. I'm actually being shot by a fighter aircraft that's coming down and machine gunning me, and these are really hard to avoid. I have to sort of zigzag through them, but I failed to do it this time. Anyway, that is the Spectrum version. And on we move to the Amstrad version. I'm just going to load this up now. It's using the very precise disk emulation of WinApe, the Amstrad Plus emulator, which actually I forgot to put it onto the non-real time mode, so we're actually seeing the game as it would load on the actual Amstrad. So that's why it's taken a little while. So you've got quite a nice little alligator title screen there, Presenta, because this is the Spanish version of the game, but it is all in English anyway. They just changed that one word for some reason. And onto the title screen. Here again, the rendition of The Great Escape, this time using the AY sound chip, so it sounds a lot better than the beeper. Notice no options like the Spectrum screen, just literally press fire to start. Indeed, on the Amstrad, this is a joystick only game. Now, into the game, notice the difference in the graphics. Straight away, you can see that it's a lot more colourful. There's no attribute clash, of course. The sprites are in the Amstrad's mode 0, which means that while they're slightly lower resolution, they have more colours. And I think in this game it really benefits. You get some nice backgrounds. The graphics aren't as sophisticated as they may look in Commando. The trees aren't quite as varied, but actually they serve a really nice purpose. You can tell what everything is. And the additional use of colour is really good because it gives you the chance of putting some shading on. You can see the buildings are quite 3D with the sort of lighter green outlines on these or darker grey building walls and stuff. So that all works really well and it makes the game just look a lot better than on the Spectrum. Sprites do flicker a little bit, but nothing like they do on the Spectrum. You see there's quite a lot going on here. In classic Amstrad style, some of the sprites as they get close to the top of the screen flicker a bit more. It's just the way the system used to work. It sometimes makes things at the top of the screen a bit more flickery. But notice there's quite a lot going on and it's really not that bad. You see the guy wiggling down the screen there, he's our bonus man. In the Amstrad version, he is exactly the same colour as all the other enemies, whereas on the Spectrum version, he was red, so you could tell that he was a different sort of bonus guy. Amstrad version as well, it plays a little bit more claustrophobically than the Spectrum version. It's quite, you find yourself dodging bullets a lot more, whereas on the Spectrum version, I felt it was a little bit easier, and I could almost do exactly what I wanted in a way, and it really didn't matter too much. I didn't get hit as much as I thought I would, whereas in the Amstrad version you really have to be quite careful, you have to dodge quite a lot, otherwise you will get killed. And so it's just a little bit harder, and you see I've just been shot there. Now again, we've got the variety of vehicles, but they're not flickering as much. There's a little bit of flicker. It seems to be a problem in this game on the larger sprites. I'm not too sure why that is. Now we're onto the second outpost now, again where we've got a lot of guys on the screen, and the game just, you know, despite all this activity, there is a little tiny bit of slowdown, but it's really not too bad. I had a whole host of little sprites on the screen then, and it feels a little bit more sluggish, quite common on the Amstrad, but nothing too bad at all. Now we're just about to approach a screen that is totally different on the Spectrum version. So the next screen, now take a look at this. Look at that, it's completely different. On the Spectrum version it had the guy in the lake at the bottom left of the screen, it had the two big tanks at the top, and the little sort of wall that you could hide behind as you grenade them. But on this version it's a completely different screen, and indeed this is the same screen that you get on the Commodore. It's just the Spectrum version is different, and I don't really know why. Anyway, that is the Amstrad version, much more colourful graphics, slightly more difficult gameplay, and some different screens. And on we go to the Commodore 64 version. Again, a SID rendition of The Great Escape, and notice the fantastic little scrolling graphics as the title comes together. Just adds that little extra element which the Commodore 64's wonderful hardware allows us to do. So let's now move into the game. Again, like the Amstrad version, it's joystick only, but notice one very major difference: the game's scrolling. Now this is much more like Commando than any other version now because of the scrolling nature of the screen. The Amstrad and Spectrum version, of course, flip screen. Commodore 64's extra scrolling hardware allows us to have a scrolling game, and I've got to say it looks really brilliant. Graphics resolution is very similar to the Amstrad one, obviously using the Commodore 64's colour palette, which in this case, actually having lots of different shades of brown, really does the game quite a lot of favours because it gives it a sort of sepia World War sort of colour effect, and I really rather like it. Notice also, as I was talking about earlier when I was talking about the Amstrad version, how different men are in different colours. The guy there wiggling down the screen, he's in blue. We saw a few guys with some grey uniforms just now, and we're obviously also got the screen fill some guys with some brown uniforms. So a little bit more variety. Also, because the screen scrolls, some of the guys from the earlier portions of the game, unlike on the Amstrad and Spectrum where you move onto a new screen, that's it. Those guys who are on that original screen, they don't come back at you or anything. The Commodore version, sometimes they actually do remain on screen. They sort of can follow you up the screen as well. So it makes the game a little bit more challenging, I suppose, because there can be, you don't just do one screen after another. You play the game on one great big long playing field. So adds a little bit of extra challenge, but also just makes the game a little bit smoother in a way. It's sort of, it's a sort of a unraveling adventure slowly rather than just single flip screen, so it gives it a slightly smoother feel, I think. Gameplay is very similar to the Amstrad version. It's quite claustrophobic at times. It's quite difficult. It's definitely a little bit harder than the Spectrum version again. And another thing, surprisingly for a Commodore version of the game, notice how the sprites are flickering as well. I suspect it does use a hardware sprites, but I think what they're doing is they don't really know how to work around the limitation of how many sprites you can have on one scan line, essentially. So horizontally positioned sprites. I think as we get too many horizontally positioned ones going on, the Commodore's actually running out of hardware sprites you can assign to those. And there are various clever ways that programmers got around this, Bubble being a particular example of a very clever method of getting around Commodore 64 sprite limitations. But this is quite an early game and they haven't really done anything with that, which is a little bit of a shame, but it doesn't flicker really any more than, say, the Amstrad version does. In fact, in a lot of cases it flickers considerably less. So here we have the Commodore 64 version of Who Dares Wins 2. I think, to sum up, it's got some slightly nicer sound effects, not that much different really from the Amstrad, but it just sounds a little tiny bit better. I definitely like the colours quite a bit more. I think they add a lot to it. And actually, one thing I've forgotten to mention is the Commodore 64 version, you only get 3 lives as opposed to the default 5 on the other two. I've got 4 right now because I've just earned a new one, but fewer lives. So it makes the game a bit harder still, but having said that, it's so fluid, it doesn't actually feel hard in the other versions. You just have to take care a little bit more. So there we have it, 3 versions of Who Dares Wins 2, Spectrum, Amstrad and Commodore 64. Now, the machine that's going to win this, it's really between 2. The Spectrum version, I'm afraid, has to take 3rd place here. Its graphics are very flickery. The graphics themselves are badly defined, there's lots of attribute clash, the sound isn't very good, the gameplay's fine, it's just not as good as the Amstrad and Commodore 64 versions. The Amstrad and Commodore 64 versions, they're very similarly matched. They've got nice graphics, both of them, good use of colour, very nice gameplay, quite a claustrophobic gameplay, good fun, challenging. Both versions of the game are great, but there can only be one overall winner, and I think because it's got the scrolling and because the sound's slightly better, I'm going to have to give the winner of this week's 8-Bit Wars to the Commodore 64.